legitimate criticism of public functionaries. I mean, for example, can I say the mayor of Karachi is pretty useless because look at the filth in this city and look at the traffic mess in the city? Is that okay? Is that fair comment? Or can I be accused of inciting a mob violence against the mayor just because
Harming
I
reputation and making aspersions, as has been written into the law. The language is so vague, and we don't know where the line is. I mean, for a long time, we've not known where the line is because it keeps shifting. But now the fact is that the state is using it, but so is society. Hello and welcome to this episode of the DigiPod. My name is Farieha Aziz. Today I'm joined by Shahzeb Jillani, who is a journalist and a co-host of Zara Hatke on DawnNews. Thanks, Shahzeb, for joining us today. We are discussing the escalation of cases, especially after the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Amendment and the insertion of 26A to do with false and fake information. In the last couple of weeks, we have seen FIRs against journalists and whether those have been a result of abduction and then arrest or arrests. Some of these cases are in Islamabad, in Karachi, and other cases have been reported from around the country, which are quite strange in nature. And that's something that we're also going to get into today. Shahzeb, Farhan Malik is still under arrest, has been charged with PECA. Waheed Murad, who got bail, also been charged with PECA. 26 is a new offense. And this is something that everybody was anticipating would happen as a result of these amendments. What have you, because you've been following these cases as well and attending the hearings, let's start with maybe Farhan's case and what has happened in just the last week or so.
Well, first of all, thank you for having this conversation. It's interesting. Usually I'm the one asking you questions, but the roles are reversed today. But you're right. I mean, both of us have followed Pakistan's draconian cyber laws for a number of years now. You have observed many cases up close. I have also, as a journalist. Farhan's case is bizarre, and I think it is probably the most high profile case after these amendments were introduced to Pakistan's cyber laws, making them even more draconian. And this was done by the parliament, people who claim to stand up for freedom of speech and democratic values. They bulldozed it through the parliament. And at the time, if you remember, many of us were saying that this is a terrible mistake. This pushes Pakistan further down the line in authoritarianism, and that this law will be used to silence any dissent, criticism, opposition to what the government wants to do. And so Farhan's case is important to follow because he's not your ordinary troll who's like, there's all kinds of stuff on internet, bad mouthing, abuse, doctored videos. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a person who's been in the media industry for a number of years, was in a responsible position as director of news at a leading news channel, and has now been successfully running a digital platform addressing all sorts of issues, social, cultural, and sometimes political as well. His platform, Raftar, was being investigated for a number of months, and Farhan was cooperating. They were talking to federal investigation agency officials. They were fully cooperating, and then we saw how the FIA asked him to come in for a conversation, and he went there. He was asked. He was basically there for like 5-6 hours, and then arrested, right? And since then, you've been to the court, and I have as well. We've talked to his lawyers, talked to family, and this case has all the elements of harassment, of bullying, of targeting someone for their journalism, because the charges that the FIA, the Federal Investigation Agency, came up in the case are ludicrous. They are vague. They talk about fake news, but they haven't pinpointed which of their content is sort of objectionable or promotes hatred or will create panic. I mean, so far as I can tell, the platform is doing well, but none of their videos have actually led to any violence or any hatred or anything that would be deemed worrying for law and order situation. So it is a classic case, in my view, of somebody somewhere in a powerful position uh, having an issue with either Farhan or the platform. We know that censorship has grown in the country, and these powerful people, whether they are in uniform or without uniform, are in the habit of dictating what we can talk about, what we can't talk about, whose name we can take, whose name we can't take. And they do it with news channels all the time. And they increasingly want to control digital platforms. And it may be that they may not like something that Raftar has published, but the decent thing would have been to kind of to sit down with the management, with the editor or the founder, and tell them that, look, this is why this is problematic. Can you amend it? Can we do something about it? And I think 9 out of 10 times, most reasonable people will listen to a request which has, if it is justified, if it's fair, they will make amends if there are any minor mistakes made. But to go to the extent of not one, but two cases, the other case being even more ludicrous, maybe you want to talk about it because you are following it closely. It has nothing to do with his journalism, and they've accused him of what? Cyber fraud, financial fraud, right?
Absolutely, a patron. He's sort of a patron in this cyber fraud that they've put the whole stack of sections in that FIR as well, PECA sections, etc. Call center related, right? But I think it's important that people know the manner in which we've seen this pattern of this excessive state overreach, where the state becomes a complainant. You don't know in the FIR also, it's usually just your entire channel. No specific content is flagged. What is it, the offending, so-called offending, and oftentimes the offense is not made out. But it's also curious in terms of the way that this is played out, where you have this first FIR, and he's remanded into custody. Then he's presented after 4 days, and the court sends him on judicial custody. And this happened in front of us, so we are there.
Yeah.
We see
Yeah.
this happen. The order was given by the court, and then turns out by evening that he has not been sent on judicial remand. He is still in FIA custody, which is strange. And so the next day, it turns out that another FIR has been presented against him, and this is now in the Malir district, right? So
Yeah.
here
Yeah.
the court expecting that this is where it would be. Also curious is the fact that in all this time that he was being investigated for about 3 months or so, nothing came up in the investigation. Then comes a civil arrest. And when he was already in custody, when you look at the FIR, the second FIR, the time data that it was reported, is when he was already in FIA custody. That's the day that he was presented at noon in court. And the FIR is of 9:30 that morning.
Yeah.
And yet, while he was in court, nobody ever disclosed this FIR at all,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it shows you that something more is at play, right? So also his bail has been dismissed by the
Yeah.
court. The
Yeah.
bail hearing happens one day. The order is not announced. The additional director is called in by the magistrate because, why was he still in FIA custody after the court order? Then it's kept for order. And now, again, as per the reports, and Dawn has also reported, the bail order is also not available. So
Yeah.
to be able to even file an appeal, and then the Malir cases come up it's just a pattern, like what we keep saying, process becomes harassment, which I also wanted, before I go to Waheed's case, what else we observed while we were in court? The cases. We think it's just about journalists, etc. But what we witnessed were these cases of random citizens
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
also been charged by, under the new sort of sections of the law. Do you want to maybe speak about that?
Yeah, I mean, while we were there for Farhan's court appearance, we realized that there were actually more cases, and there was this one case where a guy had been accused of, I guess, blasphemy, And when we inquired about it, apparently he had a dispute with his brother in the US, and the brother had warned him 2 weeks ago that, look, you're not settling this with me, so you're going to face the music. There are new laws in your country, new cyber laws, or basically the amended cyber law, and you will pay for it, and you will get entangled in it. And then, lo and behold, somebody creates a fake account in his name. There are a couple of derogatory posts there, and the FIA acts swiftly and very efficiently. It notices the post and arrests him. And this is how they did it. I mean, you look at Karachi, a city of millions, and every time we've talked about the Federal Investigation Agency, they say we are, short-staffed, we don't have capacity. Whenever there have been genuine cases of women being blackmailed, harassment cases, they don't pay attention to them. But they are so efficient that they found out where this person lives, and they went and arrested him, like, at a very short notice. And that speaks volumes about how this institution is being run.
So again, while we're standing there, we're seeing that there are other cases, and for replies, and that also sort of became apparent through the file, right? Because you don't know what it is about. Oftentimes, the person who's been arrested doesn't know what they've been arrested for. And there were replies, and not a lot of Twitter followers. And it was really, if you look at the speech, it wasn't sort of, you can't say it's illegal. Somebody, is saying, wishing ill upon you, as we say in Urdu, as a baddua. But
Yeah, or a curse. Yeah, I guess it's a curse.
It's a
For
curse.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the other thing that was picked up was that the state is a complainant. The IOs become the complainant. And oftentimes we've seen this pattern where the technical assistant is
Hmm.
the FIA is the
Hmm.
complainant. And this is also what we've seen on Waheed Murad's case in
Yeah,
Islamabad. And
yeah,
his FIR, and again 26A. And while they said that there were, certain posts, but again, the curious thing is over there as well, it
yeah.
wasn't was one of them. So he shared an article, and he has also copy pasted in Akhtar Mengel's tweet and said it is Akhtar Mengel's tweet, right?
Yeah, and
And
this is about Balochistan, right? After Mengal is the former chief minister of the province. He's very critical of how the government is handling the province. And after the attack on the train in Jafar Express on 11th March, After Mengal tweets that the way you've handled Balochistan, you've lost Balochistan. And he is very critical of government's handling of it. What does Waheed Murad do? He's only kind of retweeting or reposting a politician's comments, and he said at the end that these are Akhtar Mengel's words. So if anybody has problem with it, they should go and arrest Akhtar Mengel, right? But no, they choose to go after a journalist who's sleeping at home, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you don't know where he is. For several hours, the family doesn't know where he is. That's why they went to Islamabad High Court for a habeas corpus petition. And then finally, quietly, he's produced before a magistrate, right? Again, for violating some clause of cybercrime law. The manner in which this is done, right? It's very clear that they do it because they can, and because there's nobody who can hold them to account, right? You and I and some of our other colleagues, we take a sigh of relief when Waheed Murad gets a bail. We think that is a relief. There is no accountability. You cannot even ask questions, and on national TV, you can't even say who they were. You have to be grateful that they did not put pressure on court to deny the bail. But Waheed Murad is again, a working journalist. He may have his political views. He's one of the better journalists, right? Farhan is an experienced journalist, right? What we see in both cases is two different ways of teaching a lesson, right? What they did to Waheed Murad is like above and beyond. any process, right? With Farhan, they were following a process, but even that process is so full of flaws. I mean, you and I discuss, what section of the cyber law they have invoked, what is the content. We get into these nitty gritties. And I think what we forget is it's not about the law, it's not about the content. It is about somebody somewhere wanting to teach you a lesson, right? So these state of affairs, uh, my biggest gripe with it is fine. This has gone on for years. Different governments have come in and gone. It happened during Imran Khan's time. A number of journalists were abducted and media houses were targeted, and we raised voice against it. And we said, this is ludicrous. And then this current lot in Parliament, they have often claimed that they believe in democracy and they passed a law, and they're silent. They can see what is happening, but they're silent, right?
Complicit also, right? Because they actually
Complicit. Facilitators. Yeah,
yes.
facilitators. Yes. They are doing exactly what they're being told, exposing themselves in the process. But they think that so long as we can stay in this power sharing arrangement, all will be fine. But
But you
we've
don't
seen this so
have
many times.
as history teaches
Yeah,
us. And the musical chairs of power where one is out and the same instruments we've seen, PECA especially, have been used
yeah,
against every single political party that when an opposition has been used against them, their workers, and yet every time any party comes into power, they expand its scope. And now the way that they've amended the law, everything that was challenged in court, everything that said could not be done because I mean the law exists in a certain form, but it was abused to a certain extent as well. Although the intention, of course, of PICA, as many of us have been saying, is precisely this: to harass and intimidate, right?
yeah.
And using the process as punishment. It's not about nitty gritties in the content, as you rightly said. It's not about because all of that follows, if ever, of what it was actually about. It's about teaching a lesson, making an example, and using this process, right? So nobody can compensate for the trauma caused, whether it's through the abduction, or then charge that they are facing, the time they've been held in FIA custody or in jail, all the time they've waited for bail. All of this adds up for not just them, but everybody around them.
So Faria, I want to ask you. I mean, we've heard this army chief, the previous army chief, talk about digital terrorism, about how fifth generation warfare is the biggest challenge, how the state has to win the war of the narrative, and so on and so forth. And some of their concern, I will say, for argument's sake, may even be legitimate, right? So they come up with this draconian law where they want to punish everyone who is anti-state and spreading fake news. Now, in these cases, like Farhan's case or Waheed case, even with the existing law, what would have been the proper thing to do? I mean, clearly not barging at somebody's door at 2 in the morning, right? Not abducting them, not sending masked men, right? Not not arresting without warrant, not keeping them in some dungeon for 10 hours and then handing him over to the Federal Investigation Agency. What would have been the proper procedure so there wouldn't be as much hue and cry and concern and the chilling effect?
Well, actually, now at the stage that we are at, right, whether it's an FIA summon, whether it is an FIR, there is public perception for good reason that these are intimidatory tactics. They have nothing to do with the law, even if the law is being used as a ruse. Now, let's say if there's, for example, and this is a discussion within the journalists community, and I have my reservations with respect to this entire thing, who's a journalist, who's not a journalist, etc., all of that. And sure, there are people who do cause harm by the way that they use social media to other individuals, so long as it is about other individuals. The problem is that the law is always only used for public officials who enjoy a significant amount of power or state institutions. Where it is about individuals, as you also mentioned, those who face harassment, etc., who need the law on their side for
Yeah.
these. their complaints are not facilitated. Now, again, in terms of public officials, there's a higher threshold world over. There should exist here as well, right? Where there's a tolerance. You have forums, there can be rebuttals, clarifications, all sorts of things, right? Even if as an individual you're aggrieved, right, that a remedy should be in a private capacity. That never happens. The FIA is instrumentalized and used. The entire state machinery is used against an individual, and the manner in which it is used, right? Because arguably,
my question is, Mike, what should happen? For example, if there is a complaint of somebody spreading doctored videos, pornographic videos of a public personality, right? And you're saying, well, I'm sorry, I'm very tolerant, but I cannot tolerate this, and I want to file a case with the FIA. What should happen in a utopian world in Pakistan if democratic institutions were allowed to work and we all pledged to respect human rights and fundamental rights? What should happen in that case?
Look,
There
if
should
it
be a
is
notice.
pornographic video, there should be the complaint by the person whose video or picture, not official office, not
So let's
through.
say I'm the chief minister of a province and I file a complaint with the FIA. What are they supposed to do next?
Well, then you, one, as chief minister, would have to approach the FIA, file the complaint yourself in person, writing whatever, and then the investigation has to begin, right? And so whether it's a notice, now, of course, a lot of these have turned into cognizable offenses where they register FIRs. But even to register an FIR, to determine who's responsible, whose account this is, etc., just as we mentioned that there was a fake profile case of an individual, right?
Yeah.
So all of this has to be taken into account, where the proper process of law is investigate, find out, give that person a chance of hearing as well, or right of response, but not to make it. So if you are going to, like Farhan was cooperating, and yet you detained him and then you arrested him. And this happened earlier in Asad Ali Tour's case where he was cooperating. He went to the investigation and then he was arrested. So if there is a due process of law, where if somebody is aggrieved, right, and we're not saying that it's okay to generate, even if it's a public official, pornographic images, videos of that person, right? And should you have a remedy? Of course, you should have a remedy. But then again, there are thresholds. Somebody criticizing you and doing this, there's a world.
There's a big difference. Yeah.
There's the problem is those lines are not drawn here. And also in other jurisdictions, we have seen that public officials is much higher threshold for criticism, and you can and should be able to hold them accountable. Over here, anything and everything that you say or do is held against you, even when it doesn't fall within the ambit.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we no longer know what is okay and a fair comment and what is not. And I'll give you an example. Under the cyber law, there was a recent case in Mardan, I believe, in North Pakistan, where a journalist was criticizing the local police for not properly investigating a crime. And the police filed a case against him saying, you are inciting hatred towards police, right? And then there was a case in Dera Ismail Khan in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province where somebody criticized the clerics for moon sighting, and they said, well, actually, the first month of Ramadan was yesterday, but you are saying it today, and he was criticizing, and then they filed a case against him, cyber law case, that you are inciting hatred towards clerics. Recently, I saw there was a case in Rawalpindi where a guy took a picture of traffic police, taking away his car, and he said, I've tried to tell them this. He was disputing the action. And he said, he criticized traffic police. And they filed a case against him saying, you're inciting hatred about traffic police, right? Now, this is getting really weird because we used to hear about contempt of court. Then we heard about contempt of parliament. The contempt of national security folks has always been there. That's the most sacred cow. And now anyone can turn around and say, this is contemptuous. You're creating hatred. So legitimate criticism of public functionaries. I mean, for example, can I say the mayor of Karachi is pretty useless because look at the filth in this city and look at the traffic mess in the city. Is that okay? Is that fair comment? Or can I be accused of inciting a mob violence against the mayor just
Or
because
having reputation and making aspersions, as has been written into the law. The language is so vague, and we don't know where the line is. I mean, for a long time, we've not known where the line is because it keeps shifting. But now the fact is that the state is using it, but so is society. And anybody who has a grouse with you, and anybody who can, and holds power over you and has access. And this is the fundamental problem. If we who had if you were talking about legitimate crime and grievances and process, but when you are sent a summons but never a copy of the complaint, you ask them repeatedly, they never disclose what the charge against you is. The FIR is registered and there's an arrest immediately, and then after that things surface. So obviously then this entire coercive process shows you it is not really about something you have legitimately done, because nobody even knows what that is, and you don't know, right? And the law is always supposed to be clear so that you can conduct yourselves in a manner where not crossing lines. But here the lines are completely blurred. The lines are what anybody wants them to be, and that unfortunately.
So we are being told that we have only a few minutes left, but I think that brings us to the big question, which is what next? How do we deal with it? We have seen over the years Pakistan becoming more and more authoritarian, laws becoming more draconian, our institutions becoming more and more heartless, and the number of targets and victims and survivors is growing, right? There has to be a pushback. There has to be some resistance to this, right? Because the day I think we all decide, well, this is all useless, we might as well just not even have this conversation. There are way too many people in this country who believe in fighting for their rights, who haven't given up, and who are risking their lives around this country, in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Sindh and Punjab as well, who are doing what needs to be done, right? But I also think a there's a little lack of clarity on how to come together because there's unity and strength and unity, right? And so long as we talk about these issues in our own little bubbles, cyber bubbles or virtual bubbles, it's not going to have an impact. And I think that is the big challenge that anyone who's concerned about this, anybody who works in digital space, who's concerned about the direction of this country and about their own basic rights, ought to think about. Because, yesterday it was Farhan, then it was Waheed. It could be anyone, and not even a journalist, like you said. It could be anyone expressing their political view. And if it's not acceptable, they will be arrested by the FIA. So I think that is a conversation. It is food for thought. I'm sure none of us have any answers as yet, but I think this calls for coming together, for organizing, for speaking up. Of course, being careful. We don't want more victims of PECA or the cyber law, but being responsible, being smart, and using our heads, not just emotion.
So beyond that, I think, as you mentioned, clarity and what can be done, I think there's a need within the journalist community and broadly in society where, of course, there's a political divide and everybody has views on credibility and credentials of individuals. But the thing to focus on is really the abuse of process. And that's the thing where the common ground where people should start, where irrespective, we will never know always who the person is, what they do, etc. But we are able to see that the coercive process, irrespective, and it's.
But Faria, they have to be reasonably credible, right? I mean, they cannot be incredible. We've had some personalities who have built their entire career on preaching hatred and violence.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you think there has to be some criteria, right?
If they're abducted, you will still say the abduction is wrong. If they are charged for something other than what is incitement, which it tends to happen, then you will still say that that charge is wrong. And that's a
Yes.
minimum that you can begin with.
In law, that, even criminals have rights, right?
Totally.
And they have to be treated justly as well, no matter
Yes.
what they've done, right? So yeah, I absolutely take your point, and I think it's a really important point. If somebody is committing any wrong, it has to be dealt with according to law, right? And you can't have masked men barging into your house, picking you up, torturing you, or whatever. That's just There's no place for that.
And the law is also not using process as punishment. And so, which is the other thing that sure we
Yes.
think abduction or arrest, it's not about that. An arrest can be unlawful, a FIR can be unlawful, a summon can be unlawful. And those are the things. And so proportionality really matters. And, what is the intent, what is driving these actions? And that is something that the broader conversation now needs to turn to as well. Of course, our conversation can go on this for a very long time, but we are running out of time. This is all that we have for today. There is a need for everybody, every citizen, to be aware that this law is there. It can be used against them. We live in a digital age where our accounts get hacked or people impersonate us, and there are grave consequences. This is not just about state action. It is about anybody else who can use this against you. We are seeing a surge in blasphemy allegations against individuals, and anybody can use your name, your ID for anything. And so it is important and imperative that not only measures are taken for your own digital hygiene and safety, but also awareness of the law, and to know exactly what it is being used for, and to have that conversation in homes, in workplaces, in society at large, to see how we are to get around it. Thank you so much, Shahzeb, for making time for us.
Thank you. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.